said, you people don't know what a full working group looks like. Right? Like, how many documents do they have versus OAuth?
And we make some progress.
Let me look.
I don't know, but we actually, remember, we scheduled 7 interim meetings since the last IETF.
Thank goodness.
We
That helped,
we
right?
make some progress. Yeah, we make a lot of progress. This is like, as you know, like we scheduled 3 meetings in the last IETF, the IETFs before, so that was a lot of progress.
You have 12 drafts in the working group. And then you probably have a bunch of related drafts, right?
How many do we get?
5, 6, 7, 8. You have 8 drafts in the related draft section. So what is the drafts have?
Labs is busy.
Lance has got a billion. You should ask him.
Do we have anyone to volunteer for note taking?
What was that? Did you
Sure.
get a yes? Look at that. That was easy.
Labs has 24 documents. Oh, really?
Working group
They're
down.
shutting down.
Working group documents.
They're shutting down.
now
That's why they're shutting down.
because
That's
they're
exactly right.
they're
It's running out of interest.
yeah good.
What do you call them? Amps, not lamps.
For amplification.
Rex has 14, but there's 3 of them in the others, so they don't count. I don't know if they don't play it well.
Shouldn't you stop?
Pardon?
Yeah.
Bringing
Chair
Yeah.
forward.
Yep. So was that a yes from anyone that was note taking? Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
You can tell her.
What is work?
I don't know where they are.
I need to go, yeah, that's not.
Oh, so she's gonna actually.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
And then I can probably wrap that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we'll get started. Welcome to Suit at IETF 122. This is the note well. We have seen this a few times already, but yep. And then the note really well. Making sure that we are logged in through Meet Echo to join the queue or anything to be able to talk with the mics. If you have any questions, remote participants, obviously you have already done that. Just some useful links for you all. Yeah. And so now, Kira, did you want to
Yeah,
say it?
sure, sure. Is my mic working?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I hope the network connection won't cut off me. So this is the agenda. We have a significant update from last IETF 121, which is very good. We had a very good progress between the 121 one and from until today. And this is the agenda. Any agenda bashing? Do we need something add more or less? Yeah, if it's okay, then let's go to the for each status what the chair tracking. So the first one is the firmware encryption, suit firmware encryption, and now it's the draft 23, and the status is submitted to ISG publication review and review. So, and at the moment, no discusses. But however, there's one comment from Ori, and yes, we I, Hannes have been replying many of the email, but it's in on the system. It's no reply on the system. And the next one, next topic is the suit manifest.
Akira,
Yes,
Akira.
yes.
So when you say that, does that mean Ori hasn't replied to you?
No. The author is not replying
That's
to
fine.
Ori's comment.
No, Hannes replied to Ori's comments.
Oh, really?
But I double check.
Can you double check? Yeah.
Oh,
So
really? On the system, on the data tracker, it doesn't show up the reply. So that's all.
So on the list, I know Hannes answered. So you did it in a bunch of emails, which I found confusing.
I see.
Ori had a
Yes.
big long list of comments, and Hannes like chunked them up and answered them each individually on the mailing list.
I
So we
see.
just need to make sure we got all of them.
I see.
But then I'm assuming Ori hasn't replied to any of that.
Oh, I see. I see.
Okay, so we can double check with
So,
Ori.
Is Ori in the room?
No, Ori is an AD,
No.
so he's
Oh, I see. I see.
off ADing someplace else, right?
Okay.
He's one of the
I
art
see.
ADs. But I think that's it, unless you have other things that you're doing.
No, no. Yeah, it's just
We'll talk about it later.
yeah. Hannes will have a talk after he's going through this draft status. So yes. So the second draft is the suit manifest. Yes, we've cleared the discusses. Nice. And it's there was a lot of updates from between 121 to today, so that's really good. And submitted to RFC editor. Really nice. And third draft is the suit the trust domains. Um, and yes, this is also was the last draft was update at the deadline of the draft submission for the ITF 122. And there's comment from Thomas, and it's on the queue for the telechat. And the next page, please. Yes. So next draft is suit report. Uh, yes, there wasn't that much deep what's critical review. So it was basically the review was the changing the information draft. Probably started as an information draft, but I end up having a protocol used for the TIP from the TIP protocol. So end up having changing to propose the standard.
So
And yes,
So I'm reviewing that now. I think I'm to section 6. So I have comments on that, but I haven't quite finished it. So as soon as I finish that, I will send those comments to the authors, and they can change things.
Yes. Then they will, if the author reply to the comments from Deb, then we could go to the ISC review. And the
Right,
next
that's
one
the
is
only way I'll put them in for ISG review is if they answer my comments.
yeah, yes. And the next one is suit mud. Yes. So it's submitted to RC editor, and yes, we have some a review from ISG and waiting for the replies.
So they're in the editor's queue. Unless the editors are asking questions, they should be finished.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Roman
I
was
don't think.
holding that draft, and when he released manifest, he also released the mud draft. So it's
Mhm.
sitting in the editor's queue with the manifest draft, and then eventually the authors will get comments from the editors, like many times.
And the next one is suit MTI. This was been updated heavily from, not heavily, but these few days. There was, and they gave us comments, and it was addressed to draft 09, and then the second review from Deb was I haven't checked everything, but many of have addressed in the draft 13, which was updated last night.
Right. So I'll check that. It's on my list of things to do. And if it's okay, then I will put it in for IETF last call.
Mhm. And next page, please. Yes. Yes, this is the one, the update management. This was also one was heavily updating these few days. So Thomas was giving a review, and yes, these three nits, and Brendan updated the draft last night, so it's fixed in draft 09. And also Thomas reflected the change his comment in Shepherd writer. So it looks go to next stage.
That's the end of
And
the for you.
yes, that's the end for the agendas. Okay, then is Hannes there for the manifested slide?
Yes.
You got a clicker. You want a clicker?
Oh,
Oh,
And then she can hand
nice.
you the. Did you send them the clicker?
How do I?
So you see the clicker thing?
Yep.
Do that. Say yes. All right,
No.
Han, it's
Cool.
all yours.
okay. Yeah, very brief update for the suit firmware encryption document. I didn't realize that it was actually very late in the process already, but with version 23 and 22, which was submitted after the last IETF meeting, I tried to address a number of the ISG review comments and directorate comments. So you see a bunch of changes. Obviously, I posted mails to the mailing list. Maybe I should have replied to each mail individually, but I lumped a couple of things together, which I need to double check. But I got everything, including and specifically the comments from Ori. There were lots of wording changes, editorial changes, and I think they improved the readability of the document. I also merged section 4 and 5 because it didn't. The two sections didn't contain a lot of meat in some sense, so that confused the readers. They thought that they were just looking for more content where there actually wasn't. So in some sense, the document is is not really sophisticated, but of course there are a number of examples and illustrations and explanations on why things are done the way they are done. Based on request, I annotated the examples with line numbers, so I was able to reference specific places inside the document. I also switched from HTTP to co-op SURIs because it was more suitable for that specific context that we are using this in. Of course, you can also use HTTP SURIs if you want. Then I throughout the document used CDDL diagnostic notation, which previously I almost did, except for a few exceptions. And so Carsten Bormann noticed that as an author of the CDDL, he obviously did. And then Ken and I added an extra security consideration text to highlight the spatting Oracle attacks, which we discussed in prior meetings and which came out of the LAMPS group. So I think that's a good addition to, specifically since we are using AES CTR now in the document. Right, okay. Well, not now, we use it for a long time. There's obviously a link to the DIP test for the full details. So what I also did, there were two issues which I didn't address with the version 23, and those were related to AES, CBC, and CTR. What I did was I created a PR to remove the text on AES CBC because CTR is mandatory in the MTI document. So it looked like weird to describe CBC in great detail and have examples in there when we are actually using counter mode. So that's what I basically removed the text about CBC. You can still use it, like you can use many other algorithms, but it's not part of the MTI draft. And I think CTR obviously makes a lot of sense. The other thing was we had, and that's something Chris noticed in his review. So at the last IETF meeting, he volunteered to do a review, and he essentially noticed that in the examples we communicated an IB value in the COSI message for use with AES, but then we started with a different IB in the actual decryption, which clearly was not correct. Oops. A glitch. And so that text was updated to point this, first of all, to fix the examples, but also to point out that so that nobody else makes that mistakes. So those two PRs are there, and I would like to merge them. But before I do that, I double check what we discussed earlier about Ori's review, whether I addressed everything or whether something fell between the cracks. But I believe I addressed all the comments, and those two are still to be merged, and I would like to do that and submit a new version if I don't know if that is too disruptive, or how should I best handle this?
No, I think that's good. So I think just double check the Ori comments and make sure you're squared away. Go ahead and issue the new draft. What I'd like to do, because you've actually made technical changes and not just editorial changes, post IESG review, I'd like to make a working group last call just to make sure that it's okay. I mean, I think it will be, but let's just double check.
Yeah.
Just a short, so the chairs, once you issue that draft, the chairs will issue a short working group last call. It might have to be 2 weeks because we're in the middle of a meeting week.
Yeah.
And then once that's through, and if there's no objections, we can all send the approve AD announcement.
Okay.
And you'll be done.
Cool.
Well, you'll be the editor.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone has some cyclists maybe next week to look at this specific update, that would obviously be very helpful. Yeah. But in some sense, like there's less to look at because I removed text, but so that's that. And that is pretty much it for that document. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Next is which one?
Next in the deck is
In
the
the
fit test. If Brendan's
oh yeah, yeah.
ready.
Brendan?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, all good.
Hi. Perfectly.
All right, next slide, please. So there were a fair number of updates to the manifest draft, but these are all with the goal of clearing the discusses. So there's a couple of updates to the CDDL. So there have been some comments on the manifest CDDL that it was throwing up errors when you run it through CDDL tool, and this is because there wasn't a unifying declaration at the beginning. So we've cleared that. Then there were a few missing elements. So specifically, there was a question about whether implementation defined fetches would require arguments and whether there were arguments defined. So we've added in a section for declaring implementation defined arguments to the fetch command. There were a number of references, specifically the suit documents, CDDL definition, RFC itself, and COSI algorithms, which had previously been listed as informational. Those have been moved to normative. These are, of course, with reference to the suit documents themselves. This was a holdover from a previous generation of how we were trying to move the suit documents through. And so now, rather than have them as some future document and therefore informational, we have changed them to normative. In the meantime, during the draft of this, UUID has been updated and published. So the UUID reference to 9562. There was a little bit of commentary in the discusses on possible sources of disruption to firmware updates, specifically around network instability. So we've added a specific call out to that in the device resilience section to mention both network and power instability. Previously, the conformance matrix for implementations had been an appendix, but one of the reviews suggested that this actually should be a part of the main body, so that's been moved. There were also a number of IANA changes. So IANA had a few comments, and also there was a, now that 9562 has been published, there's now a registry for UUID namespaces. So in response to that, we are now calling out a specific registration for a namespace ID in UUID for specifically CBOR private enterprise numbers. And the reason we use that is because the recommended derivation technique for class identifiers in the suit manifest is to derive from, well, something. But if you don't have a domain name UUID as a starting point, you need something else to derive from. And so the idea here was to provide a namespace identifier to derive class IDs from. And if you're using a private enterprise number, well, you need a namespace ID for that. And so we've defined a namespace ID under that prefix. Then there was the specific call out of unset detection that came up during the IANA review, and we mentioned that that's something we want to do, but then we left the unset detection elements as reserved, and IANA wanted them specifically defined as unset detection. We've also finally worked out exactly what to do with the field that's being reserved for delegation, and that ended up being a self-reference, but still being listed as reserved. Now this will be overridden if and when COSI CWT chains are they go through publication, and we can do a delegation draft for suit, but it's entirely dependent on that, which is why it's been pruned from the existing drafts, since CWT chains are not making any progress at the moment. Next slide, please. Haha, we've cleared the discusses. As far as I know, this thing's ready to go. That's it for the manifest update from my side anyway. I don't know if there's any other commentary from the room.
So it's in the editor's queue. You do have IANA actions listed on the data tracker page. You can go and look at that. It says that you've got approval for seaboard tag registrations, but that there's some questions that IANA has that you need to clarify for them. So you probably have an email from them asking for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite likely. I'll go through and have a look at that.
You should expect to get lots of emails from either them or the editors eventually. I don't know whether the editors will do it because you're sitting in misref. The mud draft is in misref until the rest of these documents get through. Whether they will wait to handle the draft or whether they will process it and wait for the misref. I don't. We'd have to ask them. But IANA wants.
I will wait with bated breath for RFC editor emails.
Right, but you'll get IANA registered. You'll get IANA emails first. Do you see it?
Okay.
There should be an IANA one from the 12th of March for you.
Okay. I will have a look.
There you go.
See what we can clear up. Or maybe one of my other authors will look as well.
There you go.
Good possibility.
The next one is suit trust domains. Yes. Brendan again.
Okay. Yeah. I see Ken is here, but I wrote the slides this time, so I guess I'll go. Next slide, please. Okay, so these were really minor updates this time around. We just reclassified a few references, moved firmware encryption to normative. There were a variety of references that we had that were informative, so those have been reclassified as informative. And then we added a little bit of clarifying text regarding the intended devices that these are targeting. And this all comes from the review that was done of trust domains. And so specifying that if you're reading this draft, you probably have a device that's class 2 or higher and at isolation level IS8, typically speaking. You might use the multiple trust domains draft without that, but it's not very likely. Next slide, please. And we've cleared the discusses on this one too. So hooray, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So for this one, you're on the telechat for the 17th of April.
Okay. So I don't have to look at it for the next month.
No. That means that when they start reviewing, when the ISG starts reviewing and making comments on it, you can process those comments as they come in. You don't have to wait.
Was joking. I was joking.
That's fine.
All right.
Next one is suit report.
Next slide, please. Yeah, really big changes this time. This is all. Next slide, please. That's it. So good process, I think, there. I think that one's, as far as I know, that's all we have on it. I'm sure there will be questions from IANA and so on and so forth.
So there is a IANA message about that. I haven't looked at that. But it's, IANA did a bunch of, because they knew these drafts were being discussed this week, and so they did a bunch of reviews. And so you'll see a bunch of IANA reviews coming through on like the 12th of March. And so just look at those and see whether there's things you can address now. You will be getting comments for this. I do have comments on it. I just am not quite finished with it yet. So I'm on like section 6, whatever that is. Yeah. Soon.
And the next is mud.
This is another pretty quick one. There was not a huge amount that's been done. Oh, it's got the wrong date, IETF on it. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there's been a few clarifications. So first, there was there was a commentary about device certificates. So previously, in the commentary about device certificates in this draft, it called out 802.1x authentication specifically, but of course that's not necessarily relevant. It's device certificates in general. So now there's slightly less prescriptive language around the use of device certificates. Now this is all in just discussion about alternatives. So it's not really necessary to be prescriptive here. So broadening it out made a lot. Next slide, please. And then we did update. So one of the comments that I got back in the review of this draft was that it has a pros and cons section, and the reviewer found the cons underwhelming. That was his word, underwhelming. And so I broadened them out a bunch. And so what I've called out here is the specific disadvantages that may be present if you use this approach. Now, I realize this is an unusual construct in these drafts, but I feel like since there's a distinct difference between the original draft of MUD and how you might use it using SUIT with MUD, that it's important to draw the implementer's attention to the pros and the cons of these different approaches. So I have expanded it a bit and called out some of the specific considerations that an implementer might want to think about when they are implementing this sort of system. I'm not going to read these out because it's a bit dense, but they are in the most recent draft, and you're welcome to have a look at them. But essentially the summary is that there's a few interfaces that don't exist at the minute, and they could, and this is not a protocol action. There are just configuration interfaces that devices might require in order to use something like this in a fully deployed system. Okay, next slide, please. And this one's in the RFC editor queue now as well. So the discuss that was on it has also been cleared.
So because you updated this on the 3rd of March, after it was already in the editor's queue, I think you have now triggered an IANA action.
Okay.
So you need to look for an IANA message on this too. Because IANA wasn't expecting you to update the draft after it was in the editor's queue. So
I see.
So IANA says it's on hold that they have to do a review because you've updated the draft.
Okay, I should probably mention that this was purely that there was no technical change to it.
Right, and that's what you'll have to explain to IANA.
Yeah.
The next one is SUIT MTI.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, so there are a few updates here. These were in response to Deb's review. Thank you, Deb. We had first off, clarifying that the profiles that we're discussing here are really explicitly for the constrained nodes use cases. Now, the important thing about this is that we're saying, for example, that TEEP as an implementer or user of suit is not bound by these MTIs, right? TEEP can define its own profiles, and that's fine. So the point of clarifying that these profiles are for constrained nodes is partly to indicate that use cases outside of IoT firmware update don't have to stick to these MTI profiles. Next, there was a discussion of AES-CTR. Now, we did already have some commentary around the use of AEAD in the body of the text, but it appeared in review that it would have been helpful to have a little bit more emphasis around this, since it does crop up in the profiles section before finally being discussed more fully in the security considerations. So the idea here was essentially that it would be more relevant to draw this out in the introduction. And so AES-CTR is now specifically explained and how it's used in the introduction section, since that's where the AEAD discussion already was. I've drawn out a little bit on the use of payload encryption as a cybersecurity defense. Now, what I'm going with here is explaining that when we use encryption to encrypt firmware for IoT devices, that there are some assumptions that we're making about exactly what's going on. And the normal approach that we've seen in the past of saying that we can encrypt the firmware so that attackers can't read it has a few little niggles in it. And this largely boils down to the attack model that we have to assume with IoT devices. And that attack model typically involves an attacker with sample devices that they have physical access to. Most attackers against IoT devices don't just pick a random device on the internet. They typically target a specific kind of device, obtain copies of it, develop an attack for that specific device, and then start deploying it on the internet. And so that being the case, we need to be aware that firmware encryption in transit is not necessarily a defense against an attacker. So that I've drawn that particular niggle out in the text now and explained that really what we're doing with firmware encryption is protecting IP against a casual observer and protecting personal information against large-scale collection. So I also put in a reference to RFC 8990 in there in that respect, since the protection again of personal IP is probably a top priority, given that the internet is for end users. And then I've put a little bit more expansion on the discussion of defense against chosen plaintext attacks. This is an interesting one in a firmware encryption scenario, because in firmware encryption, you can assume that there's a relatively drawn-out process between the development of a firmware and its encryption and distribution. So a chosen plaintext attack is not impossible, but would probably require a supply chain attack, for example. Next slide, please. So there was one more review comment, which I wasn't able to address yet, and that is that we need to align with the Jose fully specified algorithms draft. So that's just going to be a set of name and number changes in the MTI draft, just to align with Jose fully specified algorithms.
So I talked to Mike Jones, who's the chair of COSE today, and he said ship him the draft and he'll take a look. The Jose fully specified draft is in telechat or I think it's in telechat. I don't remember whether it's in IETF last call or it's in telechat. I think it's in the telechat. So we can go through and make those changes can happen later because they're all IANA changes.
Okay.
So we can just, I just want to make sure that they have eyes on it so that they know what's happening.
Okay. So I mean, I can ship an updated draft this week if that's helpful. That just has those changes in it.
But did you just update the draft?
Yes, but it doesn't have those changes in it. Sorry, I ran out of time. But I can do that if that's helpful.
It is, I think, because the next thing to do with this is to put it into IETF last call. And so I'd like it to
Okay.
be as ready as it can be. Before we
Okay.
do that.
Yeah. So I'll put these changes through, and that should be the only change that you see to it. Just the names and numbers.
Okay.
The next one is suit update management.
All right. Next slide, please. Thanks, Thomas. We've gone through the comments that Thomas had in the review that he did, and removed references to CORIM, cleaned up a few CDDL snippets. There was a little bit of commentary around making the SEMVer encoding more explicit, so that's been done. A few dangling references and some editorial nits. And so that's all been done now. Next slide, please. And I think I wrote the slide last night that it's pending an update from the Shepherd, but I think that's been done now. If I read the tracker properly this morning, so that slide's out of date. And I think we're pretty much ready to go on this one.
Yeah, the chairs can push that to the public queue again.
Okay.
Brenda,
Yeah.
I changed the permission on the GitHub, so could you try something?
Already done.
Oh, you already done? Okay. Okay. I see. So what else is?
I think that
Yes.
was the last one.
Mm-hmm. That's the last. Yeah, that's the last draft.
Yeah.
So if time permits, I would like to talk if it's more discussion between with Carsten and Ken and who writes a lot of the CDDL. Um, the discussion I would like to raise is it will be nice to have a reasonable reference method when the draft contains both the regular sentence and CDDL. And right now, most of the suit draft is splitting a CDDL file with the MD file. And from the MD file, using the tool to generate XML. And in this stage, it includes the CDDL file and makes the one um, XML and the text file, and that will be submitted to the data tracker as a draft. And which is not, it's working perfectly. However, I have a feeling the reviewer is only reviewing the MD file and not the CDD file because it's separated. Or it's at least it's for the main the author view. It's in the separate files. Um, yeah, if that's fine for the ITIF activity, it's fine. But um, if there's any better way to do it or something, because in the what we did in T protocol was we embedded CDDL description inside the MD file, and then extract that MD CDDL description in the MD to CDDL file, and then use that CDDL file to include when generating XML, which is was easier from just reading the MD file. Was easy to see both CDDL description with the regular English language sentence. But yeah, I don't know what's the good way here. And Brendan or Ken or anybody have any thoughts or not on it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the original Cozy was done this way,
Mm-hmm.
and it produces a bit of a challenge
Yes,
in
it does.
after publication,
Uh-huh.
because essentially the concern I have is that as an implementer, I need a way to extract the CDDL file.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any kind of IANA, for example, publication of CDDL files for protocols. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a gap that the CBOR working group is looking at already. I'm not totally
Mm-hmm.
sure on that, but I think I've had discussions with Karsten on this in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's the big challenge I see with interspersed CDDL. That's why I tend to prefer having a full CDDL at the end, because as an author, I can
Yes.
copy it out in one solid block and paste it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need a script that scrapes through or anything like that. I can just take the CDDL as a single file.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand how it can be convenient to have tagged CDDL snippets scattered throughout the document, but it does
Mm-hmm.
present some challenge to the implementer. And I would rather, my strict opinion is that as a draft author, I would rather make things easier for the implementer rather than making things easier necessarily for the reader or easier for the author.
Mm-hmm.
I want to focus on what makes it life easy for the implementer. Notwithstanding that, if the script is simple, not like the one for Kose, that was a challenge. But if the script is simple, that's probably fine. So if you've got a way that you can extract the CDDL from the text, I mean, go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carson, do you have any thoughts on it?
I don't
Is
think
he is
Carson, he's only in as Zulip user, so I don't know that he's
I
actually a
see.
monitor.
I see he's maybe not. Oh, I see. So in the tip we try to accommodate with having a more complex make file. So it has a snippet CDDL and the MD file, and extract to one running the make file will extract to one CDDL file, and then include that in the appendix, which is yeah, it's doable. But I don't know how it's mandating that kind of the writing the make file for all the other drafts. And maybe this discussion might be more suit in the cozy or other working group, which because most of the draft and the suit is starting to yes calm down.
I think what I would do in this scenario is talk to Martin
Uh-huh.
Thompson, the
Uh-huh.
template for MD based drafts, and maybe he's got some ideas on that, or maybe you could contribute a CDDL snippet extractor or something like that, and he'd be
Mm-hmm.
interested in that in his tool. That's probably the route I would suggest going, so that future users of that template would gain the benefits you described.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, at least current method of having a separate CDD file from the beginning, just include into the appendix, it works. And so from the T protocol, I was able to conduct the CDD syntax check on all the suit report, all the MTI and all the CDD file in the suit working group. So and that's why I was updating about 3 updates the day before yesterday at the midnight over here was when I changed the 72 exceeding 72 character one line being too long, I made a grammar mistake and then yes, yeah, spend me 2 or 3 iteration. Yeah, so even the correct method it's doable and but yeah, I thought it would be nice some way it's yeah, how to future draft, which could, well, based on the CDDO description, is have some kind of a reference way for the author to write the MD file and how to maintain the for the reviewer and author. Um, yeah, yeah, I don't have any clear suggestion or clear thought what should be, but okay. Okay. Yeah, for me, that's about it.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Yes,
if there's nothing else from anyone, then
yes,
we might call it.
yes. And it would be nice sometime in the future IETF CDD group will come together and come up with a nice way. Yes. So thank you very much. Is there anything else from the audience or in the room?
Nope, it does not look it. So
Oh, yeah, great.
all good.
Nice.
Yeah, 5 minutes back
Yeah,
for everyone.
yeah, thank you for attending the session. And is it okay to close it from Barcelona? I don't know. It's the meet echo is operated in the Thai. Oh,
I don't understand.
oh, it's just yeah. I didn't know how to stop the meet echo from over here. I don't. Maybe I don't have to worry about it.
No, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
It'll be fun.
Okay. 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 Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I think he wanted to like,
Turn the echo off.
yeah,
Okay, here's not-
no, I don't think so anymore.
Sorry, before I after that, yeah, because there's direct transcripts and slides. I never really, I just take my own notes, but I have notes being redundancy.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so maybe
put
not.
them
Okay.
in.
So I'm gonna take them up. You want to take screenshots? It's here.
Whoa.
Yeah. No, these are mine from like yesterday.
Okay, good. I'm like,
No, no, it's not bad. It's only one. This is actually just checklist, and so these are the actual. But you know where to reach me, so.
Yeah, exactly.
2, 3. And mostly I just kind of focused on the resolution parts and the discussion about transcript.
yeah, that's all you need.
Okay.
Super. Hey, there you.
All right. See you next Ciao.
Yay. I don't think know what they're expecting. It's like once these drafts are done, then either somebody will have another idea and propose another draft, or I don't know. I don't. It's not that I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why. It's like it's in the internet. So it's not too surprising to me that he changes to it, but
Yeah, I had a plan to got one for the MTI earlier in the summer.
what else was there? Was it just?
So do you want me reading over what ones are the next one?
MTI, I need to look at.
Is that the one that was just
This is the one, he thinks he's answered the comments, but he's gonna issue another draft.
Okay.
Because he has a few more things. This is the one that I need to show you.
Yes.
Mike Jones said he'd take that. The trick is, Mike Jones is the DE for this registry. So, as long as he's aware that this is happening, I'll update him. And that can happen after it's finished. Please replace Paige. So she's got some comments she wants to make. Paige with registry. Yeah, so he needs to answer all of this. Yeah. And it would be good if he answered them. Yeah. The report she has comments. They'll be saying, needs to. You said she already sent an email about.
Yeah, they came through.
They did a whole bunch of them. I had like literally 30 of these things. Oh, there you go. So, and I had this like 5 times 13. Each one they went through all of these. Yes, he needs to mention this. Yeah. And it's going to be Joanna. Restaurant. So the manifest one you should do the manifest one first. He can have the MTI thing sitting. You should do it before the issues the next draft. Before he can wait and do what I'm going to give him. This is going to make changes.